Hello, everyone, and welcome to this workshop on contracts. My name is Joe Popp. I'm an attorney and I work for a company called Rea Associates. I've also done a lot of adjunct work in advising the artistic community on a variety of business topics, from contracts to copyright, budgeting, pricing, a whole host of things. And so today we're going to talk about contracts and more specifically talk about contracts in the context of a creative sort of endeavor. And so I have a small slide deck that we're going to run through today. And here, so we're going to look at slide deck. It's relatively short. We'll run through it pretty quickly. And then I want to get to some sample contracts. So these are contracts that you will have as part of the materials today. And they're yours to keep. Some are really more trapped for the unwary, perhaps. So we're going to go through a couple of those. The Washington State Historical Society Museum Gift Shop as an example, a gallery contract, and then a couple of custom work contracts that you can use. And of particular note, as we go through our conversation today, I'll be pulling in elements that I typically have for folks that are in the artistic space, looking at copyrights, looking at licensing, looking at monetizing those things. Those are things that we're going to cover today as we go through content. I apologize that I'm not there live for at least the beginning part of today. And a late conflict that came up, and so I'm recording this piece, but I will be joining you shortly, so we can take questions and we can look through things. If you have thoughts as we run through, jot those down. We'll take a look at those together. It just depends on which one. So let's get started. Again, today is an introduction to contracts. If you have never had a course on contracts before, you're just looking to get a little more education in the area, this is a good introduction, but it's not going to be the be all end all for you. You're definitely going to want to have a little bit more exposure to this topic. Although this will give you the highlights, the basics, along with a couple of example contracts that you can take and make your own, pull things from them. One of the things I really like about contracts is that you might imagine them as sort of component pieces. Draw things from various places you like to create your own contract. They're very, very flexible as we're going to see. So just to start off with, is a contract and what are some of the important parts of them? I want you to imagine some jobs that you've all had in the past. So I was one of these colorful people wearing the red and white striped shirts at a restaurant that you perhaps have frequented at some point in your life. And so here were some elements of that. So come to work, I'll pay you X dollars. Show up on time when you work this many hours, wear this uniform, follow this handbook, and don't be rude to our customers. If you do that, that's the contract that you have in the past. Most of us have had a job that's kind of like that. That's called an at-will contract. Employment contract. And for the most part, these are the kind of contracts that you have in the workplace today. One of the components of that is you or the employer can break the contract, fire you, you can quit. And aside from your last paycheck, usually you go your separate ways. So an at-will employment contract has that as a feature. I'm going to talk a little bit more in a minute about why maybe the experience is a little different today. Why might an employer want to have a good reason for firing you as compared to something else? Get into that in a little bit. What about this contract? So let's say that someone has been contracted to teach for this particular topic for this many weeks from this date to this date, and you're going to be paid this dollar amount for those particular weeks. When you walk out in the middle of that contract, and the employer just fire you in the middle of it? Well, that's an interesting question. So this one is a little different than the one that we had before. This is a term contract. So the parties are really locked in. And there's consequences if you just walk away from that contract. The legal term that's used there is breach. The teacher, if they decide to just walk away, they might need to pay something for a replacement. And the school, if they decide to fire you without really a good reason for it, might have to pay the full contract price, even if the teacher doesn't complete the teaching for those particular weeks because they were let go. So this is a little bit of a conundrum, right? So in this kind of contract, you really can't just walk away from it. And in this one, you really can. So this concept is one of the most important ones when you look at a contract that you're going to have with somebody else. Can you walk away from it? Can they walk away with it, from it without consequence? So often, this is one of the most important pieces of the contract. The thing that I wanted to come back to at this at-will employment contract, though, is for the most part today, an employer just doesn't fire you. And so, if I was live and going through this, we go through examples of, can they fire you because they don't like your hair color? Fire you because you didn't meet expectations about showing up on time? Did they fire you because you were a African American, a woman, man? And so some of those things, yeah, maybe they could, and then some of those things, no, there's other things outside of contract, other laws that are important to us that say, no, you really can't do that. You can't just walk away. You can't fire the other person for those are improper reasons. And so for the most part today, when people are looking at terminating employment, that's why they have those reasons usually documented in a file, a performance file, that are non protected class reasons for letting someone go. So this is another important component of contracts, and we're going to return to it again and again today. Contracts, for the most part, allow you to do absolutely anything that you want as long as you have the basic pieces together. And I'm going to show you what those basic pieces are. And then I'm going to make this less, shall we say, generic or theoretical. I'm going to actually go into some contracts with you and show you what they look like. But one of these themes is that contracts exist in a world where there's other laws that tell us what we can and we can't do. And that's important. We're going to see that. Contract terms are extremely important. You really have to understand what some of the basic issues are and some of the things to watch out for. Again, for the most part, you're allowed to make any kind of contract that you want. If you made an unwise contract, that can sometimes just be too bad on your part. And so it's very important to kind of know the basics, which I'm going to go through in just a minute. When we look at an application to a creative situation in terms of a thing that you're going to contract for, and I usually use artwork, but any of the other items in the creative space, you could add a piece of music, putting on a show, a variety of different things. Some of these same issues arise. And so I'm going to use artwork as sort of our foil as we go through some of this today. But realize that there is application to your specific situation as well. Contracts apply to everybody. Everybody can use them. So here are some of the things. What are the terms of a custom piece? What does delivery look like? Are you entitled to payment? Is the client at fault if they decide to walk away? Can you keep their money? For a gallery, what are they obligated to do for you? If they sell a piece, what do you get paid? By what means do you get paid? Bitcoin? Is it cash? Is it in a check? When does that happen? Is that immediately, within 30 days, within 60 days, some other term? What happens in terms of a fire, something that got lost in the mail, something that got damaged? Who bears the risk of loss of it? Talk about that too. As an employee, what will you get paid for doing the work? Can you use some of that artwork or that other creative product of your mind that you've created for the company? Can you use it? What ways can you use it? And at a show, what are you allowed to do or not allowed to do? All of these things could be items that would be taken care of inside of a contract. So let's go then to the basic elements of a contract. And what I've done here is to try and pull several semesters worth of law school kind of classes and contracts, smush them all together into a pretty short series of slides. So realize that in all of these things, there's a little bit of a deeper rabbit hole, just skating along the clouds, clipping the top of the icebergs. There's a lot of stuff here, right? But you don't need to go all the way down to the depths of these issues to really kind of get an idea of what they mean. So we're going to start with sort of that. And then some of them we may dive a little deeper. Consideration is the first thing that you have to have for a contract. Really, consideration is just a fancy term for stuff. and stuff can be tangible or it could be something else. You do have to have consideration on both sides of your contract. So this person's got to get something and this person's got to get something. It doesn't necessarily have to be equal to each other, though that would be nice. That's the usual thing. But I want this car, I will pay you this money, and then we'll make an exchange. Right? That's sort of the idea. So a couple of examples: pay me X dollars, I'll give you this painting. Let me show in your gallery. I'll stop calling you 3 times a day. Return to that within a minute. I'll work for you. You pay me a paycheck. So it could be providing someone a thing. It could be doing something. It could be stopping doing something. All of those count as consideration in a contract. Now that middle one there that I'll return to of stop calling you 3 times a day. So stopping doing something that you have a legal right to do, that is consideration for a contract. So if I have the right to call you 3 times a day, i.e. I don't have a restraining order or something else barring me from doing it, then me deciding to stop to do that, that's something that's valuable that there is consideration for. If I have a restraining order that I'm not supposed to call them again because I've been so annoying, stopping doing that isn't consideration anymore because I don't have a legal right to do it. So this is important in a lot of different areas of life as an artist or in artistic pursuits. But when you take a look at consideration, those are the 3 kind of categories of things to be concerned about: giving something, providing something, doing some kind of service, action, or stopping doing an action. Those are all fine things for consideration. The other thing that you need to do is to have an offer and acceptance. The question that I get a lot when I'm talking with artists about this is, how do you get to agreement on terms? Right? And so both parties have to agree to the same terms. I'll go through an example of that in a minute. The other kind of offer and acceptance you can have is to make a standing offer, and the acceptance is by doing it. So for example, find my dog and I'll reward you with $500. I can't agree to go and try and find your dog, but I don't find him. And then you have to pay me because I went and I looked. I had to find your dog under the terms of this particular kind of offer. Find the dog, then you get the money. There's no other way other than finding that particular contract. It's different when I would say, hey, I would like you to do a custom artwork piece with me. I'll pay you X dollars. And then we agree to that. That's the other kind of contract. It does have to be clear and it has to cover the major elements. So think of who, what, why, where, when, kind of stuff. Courts can use gap fillers. So within a reasonable time, reasonable compensation, a reasonable delivery. So don't necessarily hang your hat on, well, we didn't decide exactly like the street corner I was going to meet you on to provide you with this thing I was going to do for you. That isn't necessarily going to save you from having an offer and acceptance and the court finding there to be a contract. So just be careful about that. Again, the idea here is to allow contracts to be covered without sort of technicalities making them fall apart. So we want people to be able to do these contracts. And if you've done them in a fairly clear and concise way, and there's agreement on things, then a contract's going to be there, and you're not going to be able necessarily to get out of it on a technicality. So that's kind of the thought. Right? It does have to be communicated to the other person, right? So if they never get the offer, how can they accept it? And so occasionally that does come, but for the most part, that's not a huge issue. Acceptance also has to be communicated in some way. So not only the offer itself, but the acceptance has got to be communicated in some kind of way. There's all sort of cases in law school about someone sending an offer via the mail and then another person responds back and then there's a counter offer and like the mail trades places and which kind of terms work. Don't worry about all that stuff. And we're not going to cover it here. But when I say there's a deep rabbit hole, there's a huge rabbit hole right here that go as deep as you like if you wanted to explore it, if you're interested in contracts. More importantly for us is this not varying the terms of the contract or be conditional. Those are all counteroffers. So I'll give you an example. So let's say that you and I are contracting about something, and I want a service from you, or a piece of artwork from you, musical performance from you, whatever the thing might be, right? And so the thought is you're going to do or provide something to me and I'm going to pay you cash. Right? Okay, great. And let's say we're corresponding all through email. So I say, hey, my dog just passed away and I'd like to commission you to do a 8x10 oil-based painting of my dog. How much would that cost? Back. Well, at that price, that level, custom piece, typically I charge $1,000 back to me. No acceptance yet. I've just asked for something and the price has been sent back to me. Okay, great. I'd like to, get that done. I've got a event that's coming up and I really like it. And so I need it in 2 weeks. Can you do that? Yes, I can do that. It's kind of a rush for me, particularly if, you wanted to make change orders. So I tell you what I would do is I might charge you $1,500 for that. And instead of 2 change orders, I'm just going to let you do 1. And we've got to come to a kind of agreement on that at the end of the week. Is that okay? Yeah, I think that's okay. But by the way, I can only pay you in PayPal Bitcoin. Is that okay? We're just counter offering back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Eventually, what's going to happen is at the end of that process, there's going to be an email, and it should come from the artist back to the person that's paying for it. Okay, I think I've got everything. Does this look good? Can we proceed? Yes. That's it. Just yes. Yes, that seems fine. Let's do it. Also okay. Back. Now we have an offer and we have an acceptance. You've agreed to the terms. They're not conditional. They're not varying whatever the last piece was. And that forms a contract. Now, if you've done this by email or you've done it by text, you already have it written down. Still, though, it's a good idea to maybe commit all of that to a piece of paper. And I'm going to show you some examples of that with the PDFs that I have for you. But it's good to write all that down so that everybody knows what the thing is. It makes it a little bit more formal, and everybody sort of knows what they've agreed to. There are some things that can prevent formation, and so we'll talk about those quickly. Fraud, illegality, incapacity, duress are the main ones. Again, deep rabbit holes, for each one of these. Fraud essentially is stating something that you know is false, and you use that to have the other person sign the contract. What could that mean? Saying that you're this artist, but you're not this artist. So you're impersonating someone or saying that you're this person, but you're not. That's fraud. And so if I contracted with you to do musical performance, to create a piece of artwork, or to give me this piece of artwork you created, but you were fraudulent, you held yourself out as being a different person than you really are, perhaps a more famous artist or an artist of a different style or pedigree, or whatever the thing might be. That is a defense to formation. And so if you said, well, I gave this person this thing, I did this performance, and now they're not paying me. Again, if you don't have a contract, that could be that's too bad for you kind of situation. Illegality, the thing that you're contracting for is illegal. So, the typical example I give is, go and kill this person over here and I'll give you this cash. Well, killing a person is an illegal service, and so that's not going to be enforceable. What does that mean? Well, if you went out and you killed that person, aside from the other problems you'd have, you wouldn't get paid by this person. You couldn't have that hold up in the courts, right? That's in the artistic field, this doesn't come up in the murder context very often, but usually what comes up is some component of the actual art is legal. And so, from one perspective, that could be a bone from an endangered species or a feather from an endangered species. It's illegal to contract with things in that. Ivory is sort of an older example of you just can't sell things that have ivory in them typically easily. And so to do artwork in ivory, not really going to work. Right? You may do it, you might give it to the person, but if they don't pay you, then you can't sue them because it was illegal. Similarly with marijuana, there's a difference there of what state rules are and what federal rules are. And so that's kind of a weird place. Be careful about that if that's a component of what you're doing. And so if that is, let's say, legal in your particular jurisdiction, you want to get paid ahead of time. right? So get paid ahead of time and then provide whatever the artwork is. In that case, you can avoid that potential issue. We're venturing into interesting territory too on some states that, for example, have prohibited things like drag shows. And they say, you need a special permit, let's say, in order for that to be legal in our jurisdiction. And so if you do that and you don't get the permit, then you kind of get into this illegality issue there as well. So interesting kind of space that we find ourselves in. I don't want to get too political, of course, on this particular presentation, but that's the kind of thing that you need to watch out for. Incapacity. So here, typically, I bring this up for tattoo artists. If you've got people that are coming in that are intoxicated, that are, signing up for these tattoos and, their check bounces or they reverse the charges on a credit card, you got to be careful about that because, that is a defense to contract formation. So be careful, again, when you're doing those sorts of things. Duress is one of my favorite examples, the old timey movies with the landowner and then the bandits that are like, sign over our land or I'll shoot you. I'd say, okay, fine, here you go. And then they go and they record it. Now the land is theirs. Yay. Except I go back and I say, hey, they were going to shoot me. And they unravel it. Keep doing this back and forth for as long as you want. But duress is always going to be a contract formation. Preventative item. It will void the contract, will not be enforceable. It was never formed in the first place. So there's all sorts of issues with that. So if you ever find yourself in that spot, sign the contracts if you like, but you'll have that as a thing in your back pocket. What about being in writing? So when we look at being in writing, practical advice is put it in writing. Need it in writing. Sometimes the technical rules are here, but there's no good reason not to do it in writing. If it's in writing, it's easier to enforce it. It's easier to tell the court what the agreement was. It's better for the client and better for the artist if you put it in writing. So there's just really no good reason not to do this, aside from laziness or I just don't want to do it, Joe, which after today, you're going to know how to do it. And you'll have some examples. So contracts can really be in any form you like, whether written or oral. Some do have to be in writing to be enforceable. Goods over $500, services that take longer than a year, land transfers, which doesn't apply to most of the things that you're doing. Tangible goods over $500. So this means it's on the wall. And you see some artwork behind me. So if you were going to buy any of these pieces and over $500, it would need to be in writing to be enforceable. It's also easier, of course, to prove the terms. So get it in writing or reduce it to writing. If you talked about it back and forth and you've agreed to it, write something and then send it to them and say, this is what I remember. Is that right? Do you remember it that way too? And do that at the front part of your engagement. It makes it so much easier later if there's any kind of issue. For goods over $500, there is an exception for custom order work. So if I'm doing a custom piece with you, that is different, right? So that one does not need to be in writing to be enforceable. But again, just because it doesn't have to be in writing, get it in writing. It is the way to go for sure. 100%. So I'm going to raise this issue for us. This up here, this is really the top level, kind of easy, back and forth, basic elements of a contract. This is the just on the top of the clouds, going over the top of the iceberg kind of level of this. I'm going to show you the practical application in a couple of different contracts and a couple of different settings in a few minutes. Right, we're going to go through those things. Just note that these are the elements of a contract. When we look at risk of loss, this is one of the elements that's often covered in contracts. And so think about this. If an artwork is hanging in a piece of gallery, what happens if the gallery burns down? Or if the piece is lost or damaged during shipping? If it's sitting in your apartment or studio, there's a flood, it's destroyed, it's stolen. All of these things are terms that you can have either in contract with the person that's contracting with you to do something or with your insurance company. So right now, if you have renter's insurance, is it going to cover your inventory of CDs, artwork, tools, all of the different things that you might have as an artist that would be beyond what a normal non-artist would have in their living arrangements. Is it going to cover those things? Is it not going to cover those things? These are things that you'll want to look at as a term in the contract that you're going to be engaging with, whether it is with an insurance company or with someone else. So I've got a couple of examples of how to. Insurance is really important. Bad things can and they do happen, and really insurance is a term, is a tool to help you to manage that risk, do something about it. The Columbus Arts Festival, which is every summer, for example, requires artists to have $1 million of insurance coverage, which is one of the reasons why, if you've ever gone down there, all their artwork are in those tents. The tents do have flaps that come down for overnight when no one is there, and there may be some security presence that's there and some cameras that are watching what's happening. So it's not like you're open invitation for people to go and steal things from them. There's some practical barriers for them to use to do that. But at the other side, on the artist side, you have $1 million of insurance because you're required to have it at that show. So if all of your stuff gets stolen, insurance company is going to reimburse you for that because you're required to have that kind of insurance. It's not all that expensive. I think one of my co-professors that I work with at CCED, she shows there fairly regularly, and it's a pretty reasonable dollar amount for the coverage. It was either $50 or $100 for the whole weekend for $1 million of coverage. So like, it's not all that expensive, but having it versus not having it is a really big difference. One is you're working without a net, and the other one is you have a net. So it's definitely something to worry about, particularly inside of the contract. If you're not sure if you have risk of loss, you should assume you do and have assurance of the premium. So art in your apartment, there are some issues with that. Renter's insurance doesn't necessarily cover everything. There are things called separate personal article policies that can cover the appraised value of your art. One of the issues that artists often have in this space, though, is appraised value. So are you going to have your Batman Starry Night worth $50,000 like you think it is if it gets stolen? Or is it going to be a much smaller dollar amount, perhaps just materials costs? This is one of the issues that artists have to navigate. There are services out there that can appraise a particular piece. And of course, if you're an established artist and sell pieces fairly regularly, original pieces, there tends to be a typical dollar amount per size of your particular piece that you can substantiate if something were to happen to it, it's stolen or broken. With art in a gallery, same kind of issue as the appraised value. It is kind of nice that in the course of you selling it at a gallery, hey, I put it up there for sale at $5,000. The gallery accepted it. I think it's probably worth $5,000. That's a little different than you've never shown it anywhere. You've never sold, an original piece, and it's been sitting in your apartment, and it gets stolen or destroyed. Those are just two different situations. So in the contract, you can specify the value. Does that necessarily control with the insurance? Maybe not, but at least it's a factor that is in your favor. And so I'm going to show you in a minute some of the gallery contracts that we could see this in action. Art and shipment. If this applies to something that you're doing, do be careful. Shipping protection is often capped at a particular dollar amount. It also can be impacted on how you wrap the thing. I'll tell you, I've had some nice size originals that have been sent to me through the mail. They are packed very, very well, multiple layers, closed styrofoam plus a bunch of open space, sometimes with wood construction on the inside, and then a lot of cardboard and the like on the outside. So do be careful. If you're really shipping something super high end, there are specialty shipping companies that work specifically with artists. that will go through all of that and can help out. But I'll just give you an example of something in the world that a good artist friend of mine had to deal with. So I often go to Dragon Con, which is a big convention in Atlanta, Georgia every year. It's I think it's the second largest after Comic Con. And so one of these artists was flying down there, and they had printed out a lot of materials to sell, um, prints and cards, all kinds of things. And so they boxed them all up. They shipped them down through one of the major shipping carriers, UPS, FedEx. I don't remember, but it was one of those. And then her original, she took down with her on the airplane, so she took them with her. So they've always been. And so she got down there and she got her originals down there, but all of her multiples got lost in the shipping process. And so if she got them 2 weeks later, she couldn't sell them because the thing would be over. And so was the company at risk of having to compensate her for all that lost revenue? No. So be careful when you're doing this shipment stuff. Risk of loss goes beyond simply what the contract says and goes into the practical as well. So if you're really worried about it and it's an important show to you and you need to be able to have that stuff, maybe you don't fly, maybe you drive. The reason you drive is because you don't want to trust the shipping. So as I say often in copyright and some of these other areas that sometimes I do presentations on, copyright's nice, but don't put a high res, photograph of your stuff on the internet if you expect to sell it again multiple way. It's the practical side of the situation. So show to and risk of loss. Just be careful of that. That's another thing to add in as we come through stuff. So we have some example contracts to run through. And so I've got a couple of sample contracts in the gallery space. And then I also have some sample contracts that we're going to go through that are in the custom contract, custom artwork kind of space. So I'll start with this one as I usually do. And again, all these materials are available to you, so you have them, you can take a look at them. This one being with a gallery. So you're going to put some of your artwork in a gallery, and I'm going to go through some of the terms. It's a relatively short contract. It's 2 pages, so not super huge. And I'm not going to go through absolutely everything, but I do want to point out a couple of things here and there, just so that you're aware of them. So in contracts, often it's useful to go through a specific one and pull out things so that you can see them and how they operate, rather than go through a slide deck. So that's sort of warranty. So right here at the top, we'll make this just a little bit bigger. You warrant that you created the work, own it, and the descriptions are true and accurate. What the heck is this about? Well, this is the broad piece. Are you the artist that you say you are? If this is in the style of this artist, did you say, I am me, and I did this in the style of this artist? Or did you say, I am this artist? Totally different, right? Different price point. The buyer is buying a product that they think is done by this artist, but no, it's done by you in the style of. So this is where you can run into those issues too. When we get into scope of agency, so this is a really important one, and people selling artistic works is incredibly important. Whether you're an exclusive agent or a non-exclusive agent makes a big difference. If someone is your exclusive agent, it means that they're the only person that can sell your stuff in whatever the jurisdiction is that you're contracting with. That includes you. You can't sell it either. So be careful. There are good reasons to do an exclusive agent relationship. Sometimes artists decide, hey, I don't want to deal with all of the selling of my stuff side of things. I just wanted to do artwork. Someone else to do everything else. That's fine. An exclusive agent agreement is available. There are places online typically that do that. But you'll have maybe some places, galleries here locally as well that could do that for you. For the most part, though, what you're looking for is a non-exclusive agent. You're looking for this kind of language here. Artist is free to exhibit anywhere for stuff that's not in the galleries. places, and that's totally fine. Terms, duration, how long is it going to last? It will last from this date to this date. Transportation. This is an interesting one, and I don't like the way that this particular contract is written because it sort of hides things in this term, but packaging and shipping charges, insurance, and other handling expenses, and risk of loss or damage when delivery to the gallery. So this is artist to gallery, that piece, the risk of loss is on the artist. Does it right there. For return of artwork from the gallery to artist, artist shall be the responsibility of the artist. So here we have from artist to the gallery, risk of loss is on the artist. From the gallery to the artist, risk of loss is artist. So the transport in both directions, risk of loss is going to be on the artist. What does that mean? It means that if the item is lost or damaged, the gallery isn't going to pay for it. The artist, if they have insurance, that's great. They could be compensated, but it's on the artist to figure out what that looks like and if they want to buy insurance, either from the shipping company or from a general liability insurance. So this next term is one that is kind of fun, and you may have this in different areas, and it's not a gallery, but some event that you're doing, and so this could be a term that's used by all sorts of people. Gallery shall make reasonable good faith efforts to promote the sale of the artwork and to take other promotional activities on the artist's behalf. What in the world does that mean? Essentially, it means nothing. What does reasonable good faith mean? Does that mean they're going to print out cards and they're going to run down to the North Market downtown or the Short North and distribute them or to hang them up? Maybe. Add it to their website? Maybe. Put a notice somewhere in their gallery? Maybe. Send out mailers? Maybe. Have an opening with cheese and wine and band? Maybe. Probably not, though. It's all of those things. And so when you look at this term, promotion by the gallery, insert your particular situation here. It doesn't really do much. What you want is to have something more specific. So for example, the gallery shall print out not less than this number of those 5x7 cards and distribute them to not less than 4 places around town. The gallery shall have an opening for me. It'll be on a weekend. It'll be from 5 to 8 p.m. The gallery shall provide cheese, munchies, and I will provide wine. Things that are more specific are more likely to be done and to be enforceable than something like this. This really doesn't tell you anything. When you look at copyright, so we're not going to talk a lot about copyright in this particular workshop, but here's what this particular one says. Artist reserves all rights to the reproduction of artworks except as in writing. So this piece up at the top, this is fine, right? This tells us that according to this contract, the copyright is going to be owned by the artist. The artist has created the work, not selling copyrights, just selling physical license in this particular case. However, this next piece that's in yellow here is not super great. The gallery can arrange that the artwork photographed and publicized with the artist. Photography is also permitted in the public in the gallery. They're going to take a high-res photo of your stuff and put it on the internet. Not good. Can people go and copy that? Yeah. Are they going to put a big old watermark on it? Maybe. What about, the person who's going to come into the gallery, see a piece, really enjoy it, come up with their cell phone, take a picture of it, and then go and print it out. And there they have it. They have a print. Why would they buy yours? Similar kind of thinking, right? So if you don't like this, this is an item that you might want to try and have changed in the contract. And I'm going to give you a way to do that. Pricing. So they do ask that pricing is consistent with those outside of the gallery. The reason for that is down here. In this particular gallery's contract, they're going to take 30% of the price. That's their fee. tell you that range is typically between 30 and 50%. So if you want to clear $1,000 for your work, you're not going to sell it for 1,000. You're going to sell it for more than 1,000. So that net of that fee, you're going to clear $1,000. That's what that provision is all about. It happens all the time. Artists do, because of the selling costs of having it in a gallery, increase the sale price because they know they're going to get a big chunk of it to go to the gallery. In terms of payments, galleries will pay the artist all proceeds due within 30 days of the sale in check in US dollars. Specific, it's nice. Specific number of days, kind of format of the payment, the fact it's going to be in US dollars, no Bitcoin, something else. This is a reasonable provision, and I'll show you an example of another one in a minute. Now, this one, I really love this one because it's so tricky. Loss or damage. Gallery should be responsible for safekeeping of all consigned artworks. You just read that and you don't read the second sentence. You're like, okay, great. So me to the gallery, risk of loss is me. Well, it's at the gallery must mean it's at them, risk of loss. And then when the shipping comes back to me, then it's me again. But no, look at the second sentence. Artwork is handled with care and expertise, thus gallery is not liable for damages. So, this one's kind of a sneaky one if you're just kind of glossing over it. Here they're saying risk of loss is never us. Shipping to us, here, back, all that risk of loss is yours. That's okay. That means you're going to have insurance, or it's a good idea to have insurance. But just realize that that kind of provision happens. All right. So that's that contract. Let's move on to this other. And then I want to get into some of the custom ones, which might be ones that you have questions on. We're going to leave those. We're going to go through them quickly, but then I'll also have time for us to do questions. Washington State Historical Society. So this one is 9 pages. It's got a lot more boilerplate to it. It's the state, so of course they're a little bit detailed about everything. I'm just going to point out a couple of highlights here. Scope of agency. It's only for the artwork submitted. So this is good. This is a non-exclusive agency. That's something that you should always check for in if someone else is going to be selling you something. Governing law. This one goes a little beyond what we saw in that first contract. Again, we have to warrant that we own things and that our descriptions are accurate, but also that we comply with state and federal laws, including Maritime Mammal Protection Act, Whales Team, the Endangered Species Act, Bird Feathers, and the Archaeological Resource Protection Act. Things that you found and dug up that don't belong to you, that are historical in nature, that might be covered by some kind of protection, particularly out in the Southwest and in some other areas. There's quite a bit of archaeological valuable materials that you might find and incorporate. So that one goes a little bit further off. This one has another thing that I find kind of interesting. So on the pricing, the gift shop is going to be 40% of their cut. And they also specify that in terms of gift discounts, the gift shop can decide to do a discount on their own. They don't have to ask the artist. And if they do, it's going to get deducted from their piece. So the artist is going to get the full artist share at the full retail price. So if they do like a holiday sale and they say 20% off, that's going to come out of the gift shop's commission piece. That's important. It can be written the other way where they can decide to do a discount and then they get their piece and you get your piece. So yay, you agreed to it. You didn't. So be careful of that kind of term. This one is another little kind of tricky one. It's not designed to be abusive. It's a convenience for them, but check out the payment term. Gift shop shall pay the artist all proceeds to the artist within 30 days of the last day of the month in which the piece was sold. So, imagine that you have a sale that happens at the end of the month, which is, say, January 31st. 30 days after that is in March. That's when they would pay you on this particular payment term. That's fine. Remember that the other one was 30 days from the sale. This one is 30 days from the last day sold. They're slightly different. Loss or damage. So on this one, the gift shop is liable only for the loss or the damage. to any consigned artwork that's due to negligence or intentional acts. This is an employee throwing it on the ground, or stomping on it, or being so negligent in setting it up that of course someone's going to do it, knock it over. So this one is kind of iffy, right? Like in this situation, I'd want to have insurance on my pieces. I don't think this is going to be effective. And in fact, you see, they do require that the artist shall maintain insurance for maybe last piece here on this particular one, and this is something that does come up often in situations where people are going to be selling items for you commission, which is that if you sell artwork due to a relationship that you formed because someone saw your stuff in the gift shop, the gift shop wants 40% of the selling price of that work that they didn't even have. This is a similar kind of thing in galleries, so I bring it up as a term that you should be careful of. So that's it on this one. The thing I want to give you as a master override switch, and I don't have this written down, but I'm going to give you just a quick idea of what this looks like. Let's say that this contract had that term of, will allow people to photograph your work in our gallery. You don't like them. So the thing that you want them to agree to is, well, while I'm showing your gallery, you don't allow people to come in and take photos. They can't do it while my stuff is there. So you want that as part of your contract. So you're talking with somebody and you're like, well, your lawyers drafted this up. It's a big pain to go through and try and redo the different contract terms. So I do that. You say, no problem. I learned this thing that's going to let me do that. Here it is. Get a blank piece of paper. Top of it, you want to reference whatever the name of the contract is. So in this case, State of Washington, State of Georgia, gift shop, consignment contract. And then you want the date. So between them and you want the date. So put that stuff at the top so that you're just referencing this document. And then put this language in. Item 1. Notwithstanding any other provisions of this contract to the contrary, notwithstanding any other provision of this contract to the contrary. So this is the master override language. You're saying, even if it's in this contract somewhere, even if it says something about this, I'm about to change it. While my artwork is in this gallery, the gallery shall not allow patrons to take photographs of any artwork therein. Here. Okay. And then you'll do a signature block that's similar to whatever signature block is on the main contract. So here you see the gift shop artist. You can just copy this piece onto that piece of paper. And so there you go. That will allow you to essentially override any other provision of this contract that has something else in it. And it's signed after this contract was signed. Right? It's signed after this contract is signed. So it will apply because, of course, it was made later. It must be a controlling override. It's not like you signed the override first, then you signed this one. This gets into a little bit of a complex area of contracts, but that structure is going to work. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you want to change the contract provision, you don't have to have them go in and change things in the actual contract, redo the whole thing. You can just master override it with that particular piece. So to take one thing away from this session, that's a really good thing. Right, with the time that we have remaining before the time that I want to save for sort of the live question and answer session back and forth, I want to go through a couple of sample contracts that are on the custom art side. So this is really where you're coming up with the terms yourself. You're driving this. These are your contracts that you're going to give out to people. Whether this is for a piece of artwork, piece of music, performance, anything else in the artistic space, you can use this same kind of format. So let me go through these pretty quickly. And again, we'll save some time to go through for questions. And if you have particular settings that you want to maybe ask some questions about. So starting off easy, this is the date. Here's the artist, here's the purchaser. This one has an address, phone number, email. Get that information. I know it sounds cheesy, but so often you have issues with just being able to contact each other. Put it in the contract. I do that on all of my contracts in business. Put all that contact information in there. It's just the way. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this kind of painting. I'm going to describe it. It's going to be in this kind of medium, this kind of dimensions, and here's the price. Basic details. You can take this and say, see attached, and just add pages and pages and pages, mock-up drawings, first runs, prior to a change order, whatever you want. You can include all that stuff. Artist is going to do this. Artist agrees to do up to 3 preliminary sketches to get approval. You can change that to whatever you want it to be. Images can be emailed. Artist is going to retain all the stuff to that, or it's part of the price. It's up to you. Right? You can change that as you like. How's payment going to work? Pay me 50% up front, non-refundable, not going to get it back before I start work. I'm just not going to do it unless I get it and I get to keep it. When is the rest of it due? Here. Balance is due upon when I complete it and I deliver it. Could it be after the last change order and then another time in delivery? Sure, you could do a third if you want that big. How's delivery going to work? Copyright. All this is mine. The default rule in the United States is that if someone commissions you to do a piece of artwork, you don't say something different in writing, that person owns the artwork, the physical copy and the copyright, right? So if you didn't do a contract which says, no, I, the artist, keep it, if it's a custom commission piece, that other person owns the copyright. So they can reproduce it, they can stop you from reproducing it, all that stuff. If you want to keep the copyright and they want to buy it from you, great. Well, it's not just the price of the artwork. Price the artwork. I'll price the copyright. You can buy the piece and the copyright for this price, or just the piece for this price as well. So you're in control of things. This one is an interesting one, right of first refusal. So in the case of a piece of artwork, the idea here is that in the event the purchaser doesn't want to purchase the commission artwork, the purchaser can refuse. In that case, the artist will retain the refused artwork in the non-refundable deposit. So this one is drafted a little different than what I typically see. Right of first refusal usually is if you ever go to sell it to somebody else, let me buy it at the same price. So this is not a situation where you can say, well, I'm unknown right now, but man, I'm going to go someplace and my artwork in the future is going to be worth like $20,000. So if you ever want to sell it for $20,000, no, you can't do that. You have to sell it to me for what you bought it for, $1,000. That's not what that is. Instead, if they would sell it for $20,000, you could buy it back for that price at that time. So you could buy it for $20,000. That's with a right of first refusal usually. All right, the last custom contract, and I include this one. I think it's got a lot of good sort of pointing out things that you should consider in the case of artwork. And this is a free available contract. You can find it on the internet. I'll give you a copy here as well. Again, date for the parties. Note that this one doesn't have all the address and email that I think you should have in it. Contact information. How do we get in touch with each other? We will create the artwork. And again, this one is sort of a fill in the blank. Is it the size, the medium, the resolution? Those are all pieces you can do. What is the deadline? Comes around. Then we're going to do feedback. And then we're going to continue going. What are those milestones? So that you know what the heck you're looking for, and then the client also knows. Same deal if it's going to be, a show, musical, a performance, and the like. Are you going to produce a set list? Are you going to produce an example of what you're going to do? When is that going to happen? Do they get to approve it? What happens if they don't approve? Does it stop there? What kind of money do you get to keep? all of that stuff is things that you can keep up in. Rights granted. So here is a good way of licensing. And so what kind of rights are you granting? So for example, I'll provide you a limited usage of this image to put on your products, but I can keep selling it to other people and I can put it on my products. So if they put it on, let's say, greeting cards, can you also put it on greeting cards? Yes or no? For how long? In what area? So one of my co-professors did a logo that a local honey shop really liked. It was a bee. And so the agreement was, hey, you can use it on products, products, they can put it on their storefront, they can put it on t-shirts, coffee cups. They couldn't put it on greeting cards because the artist wanted to continue. Okay, so you can decide how broad or how small that is. And if you're asking yourself, well, what could I do? Anything, right? It's up to you. You're the master of being able to decide. I give you all of it, I give you some of it. It's whatever you guys work out. The territory, is it just here in Ohio? The Great Lakes area, Midwest, United States, North America, worldwide? Does it allow you to do it on the internet, which can be really accessed in like large geography? These are things that you want to think about and put in there. And then how long? Are they going to have that license for forever? Are they going to have it just for a limited period of time? In other classes that I've taught on this particular area, when we're looking at monetizing licensing of copyright, often it's for this initial period, it's this much dollar amount, this. 5 years from now, I want to see if you've really taken off and you're the new Chipotle and you've used this image I've created for you. I want to share in your success. And so I'm not going to do a $3,000 license the next couple of years. It may be $20,000 with them. So you can use your licensing to help you to monetize the copyright side of your artistic expression, whether that is a piece of artwork, logo, musical work, whatever the particular thing is. The payment side, this one has a couple of interesting components as well. So there's a 25% deposit at the beginning. Full balance is due upon final artwork. And this one includes a kill fee. So I terminate the contract after the deposit, but I've completed the first round of revisions, then the deposit's a kill fee. So I'm going to keep the deposit and the client will owe an additional 25% if it's after the first round. So you can pick your particular piece here. The idea is what you should do is initial work, first round of here's the change order, do you want me to change it, to the final piece of approval, to the final delivery. So if you like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Get 25% of the payment in each of those 4 points. 25% up front, 25% when we're doing our first change orders, 25% at the final approval, and then 25% at the end. If you do it that way, then you're going to be paid for each step along the way. If you do a 50% up front, that's fine, and then 50% at the end. Okay, just realize you could be exposed if you're going to go over that 50% cost and all the work that you're going to do from the beginning to the end. I think that's about it in terms of the content that I wanted to show you in these sample contracts. So yeah, you do have these available to you. We're about an hour in, and so hopefully I'm going to be joining you here in just a minute to show you the rest of the presentation. We'll go through any questions that you have. If you have questions on these contracts, we can go through those. And so at this point, I'm going to stop the recording, and I will be with you shortly live.